Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another Season 9 League of Legends Champion Guide. Today, I'll be covering Galio, the Colossus. In this video, I'm going to be covering why you should play Galio, things like his rune choices, his abilities, his combos, his lane phase, and other things of the sort. Now, as it stands right now, I would say Galio is probably the best mid laner in all of League. He is, of course, getting some nerfs in 9.2, but they're not going to cripple Galio. He will still remain a really strong champion, and right now, he's probably the best. He is a champion that can snowball like crazy, and he even has the potential to one-shot people while still remaining somewhat tanky. With your items, you're going to have a pretty high health pool, and of course you do get bonus resistances whenever you activate your W, and when you combine that with Aftershock, you're going to be very hard to take down. He's also got a lot of crowd control built into his kit, and his ultimate alone is why he is one of the best team fighters in all of the mid lane. Although you do usually want to build a lot of AP so you can one-shot people, if you do fall behind you can always build tanky as well, so you're not completely useless in the later stages of the game. Like I said, he will receive some nerfs to his Q ability in 9.2, however Galio does have a really strong kit, and he will remain a strong champion moving into Season 9. Now as for your runes, you pretty much just have one choice, and it's going for Resolve and Sorcery, picking up Aftershock as your keystone. Aftershock is pretty much a must grab on Galio because you will receive a lot of extra tankiness whenever it procs, and it will also deal some nice magic damage to enemies around you as well. This can proc every 35 seconds you immobilize a target, and Galio has multiple ways to immobilize those targets, so you can proc it really easily over and over again. You'll be very durable, and since your W ability is a taunt, you can hold them in place and get off that burst damage. You'll then want to pick up Shield Bash because you do get a shield from your W ability every 12 seconds of not taking damage, and this will give you some extra armor and magic resist, and also increase your damage on your next attack. Then move on by getting Bone Plating, so the next 3 spells or attacks do less damage every time you proc the ability, and get Overgrowth so you get some nice extra health when minions die near you. As for the sorcery side, I like to go for Mana Flow Band and Absolute Focus. Mana Flow Band is just going to help with any mana issues you may have, and Absolute Focus will increase your damage when you are above 70% health. Since you do have the potential of jumping into a team fight with full health because of your ultimate, this can give you a really nice extra chunk of burst damage. You do also have the option of going for Transcendence if you want 10% cooldown reduction when you reach level 10, or Gathering Storm if you're playing for the late game, but usually I find I get a lot more from Mana Flow Band and Absolute Focus. As for your other little mini runes, you basically just want to go for 10 Adaptive Force twice, and then pick up Defense so you get some scaling health based on your level. You could of course switch for Armor or Magic Resist instead, but usually Galio will be durable enough and you can get away with these runes rather easily. So now let's move on to Galio's abilities, and let's look at why he is such a monster in that mid lane, and why he is such a strong team fighter. So first up would be that passive, Colossal Smash. This is a nice passive that has a static cooldown of 8 seconds and deals damage on your next basic attack that has scaling from your AD, AP, and even your magic resist. So whenever you attack a target and this is off cooldown, it will do damage to that target and anything within a 75 radius for that damage noted above. Now although this does have an 8-second static cooldown, meaning it does not get reduced by cooldown reduction, it will be reduced by 4 seconds every time you hit an enemy champion with one of your abilities. So that means potentially to use this the best, you will want to auto-attack with that empowered Colossal Smash, and then hit the enemy with 2 of your abilities, and it will be off cooldown, so you can hit them with this again. It's also really great for farming as well, because your Q ability does do AoE damage as well, and when you combine that on minion waves with this passive's damage, you will do a lot of AoE damage and can clear them up really quickly. Then of course if the enemy mid laner does decide to roam, you can shove it really quick and try to take down a tower plate for additional gold. Next, moving on, we've got your main source of damage, your Q ability, Winds of War. This is a really nice ability because it doesn't have the longest cooldown out there, and it has a really nice AP ratio on the first hit, and also deals damage over time based on the target's maximum health, so it's great against tankier champions as well. The numbers on your screen are going to be changing in 9.2, it will deal less damage and also cost you more mana, but it's still going to be a really strong ability, and the one you're going to max first in all games on Galio. Now when you activate this ability, you will fire wind that arcs before meeting at a target location. Anybody hit will take that gust damage, and anybody that stands in the tornado afterwards will take that tornado damage. It will last 1.5 seconds, and it does tick every 0.5 seconds, so that means there will be 3 portions of damage in that tornado. So this ability here is great at both last hitting minions and harassing the enemy champion. Once you do get some ability power, this has the potential to one-shot those squishy caster minions on the backline, so it's great at farming, but of course you will want to try to hit the enemy champion with it at the same time. If the enemy champion is rather mobile, it can be pretty hard to land, but keep in mind both your E ability and your W ability hold the target in place, so as long as you can land that, they are going to be taking this damage, they don't have much of a choice. Next up we've got Galio's W ability, Shield of Durant. This is a really strong ability for Galio because it does grant you a shield every 12 seconds you haven't taken damage that absorbs a bunch of magic damage. It's also based on your max HP as well, so as you do get those items like Morellonomicon that do have a health pool on them, it will get bigger and bigger. Since you are usually going to be against an AP champion in the mid lane, this is also very effective in trades, so you need to try to get it up as much as possible and then go for trades and block damage when you can. Of course then, one of Galio's weaknesses is those pokey AD champions like Jace, because of course this shield is going to do absolutely nothing for you. Despite all of that though, this is still a really strong ability even against the pokey AD champions because there is an activated portion as well. When you do activate the ability, you will get a bunch of damage reduction and also an AoE taunt. This damage reduction scales off of your ability power and your bonus magic resistance, even the armor portion scales off bonus magic resist. So basically as Galio, you want to jump in with either your ultimate or your E ability and then activate this and get a taunt off and of course get damage reduction before you actually taunt the targets. You will be able to move when you are channeling this ability, but you will be slowed by 30%, so you have to be very careful when you do activate it. The amount of time the targets are taunted as well as the size are scaled off of how long you cast this ability, so you do have to be kind of careful when you do use it. If you want to taunt a bunch of targets for a long duration, you will have to channel the ability for a long time, but if you want to go for a really quick combo, you may want to just tap it to hold them in place for a really short duration. This is a really strong ability on Galio, and it has both offensive and defensive uses. Next, we move on to one of your main ways of engaging onto the enemy, your E ability, Justice Punch. When you activate the ability, you'll briefly step backwards before launching forwards. You will deal damage to all enemies within that line, but you will knock up the first enemy champion hit for 0.75 seconds. Also, make sure you keep in mind that this ability cannot go through terrain, so don't try to jump over walls with it because you're going to fail horribly. Either way though, this is a really nice ability for jumping onto the enemy champion and then following up with your W and your Q. A more advanced technique with this ability as well is using it to dodge skill shots. Since you do briefly step backwards when you cast this ability, a more advanced player will be able to use it to dodge skill shots. If you know you can't simply move out of the way, you can activate this ability and you will step backwards, the skill shot will miss, and then you will launch forwards. With that said, however, usually you will just be using this to engage onto the enemy champion and then following up with the rest of your kit. And that of course brings us to Galio's ultimate, Hero's Entrance. This here is a really strong roaming and teamfighting ultimate that has a really long range, however it also comes with a really long cooldown. When you activate the ability, you will choose an allied champion within the range as your landing spot. After 1.25 seconds, you will jump to that target and knock up all enemies in the zone for 0.75 seconds. So yeah, that right there combined with a 70% AP ratio is why this is such a strong ultimate. In a clumped up team fight, you have the potential to deal damage and knock up the entire enemy team for 0.75 seconds. Needless to say, if you can pull that off, you're going to have a pretty damn strong team fight. This ultimate's also one of the reasons Galio is so strong in the mid lane, because with that 4,000 to 5,500 range, you can roam partway up or down river, jump to an ally and help them out if there is a team fight or of course just a gank happening to sway the fight. You'll be able to influence fights and just the game in general from a really long range as if you were something like a Pantheon, Shen, or Nocturne. The difference of course being the fact that this can knock up the entire enemy team, so it's generally a lot stronger than any of those ultimates. You're also generally going to make your team a lot more effective when they're trying to take dragons or barons as well, because the team kind of has to funnel into a choke and they have to group up somewhat, and this is where Galio's ultimate is most effective. So basically throughout the game you can kind of just sit in that mid lane, and whenever you need to, use this ultimate to go help your teammates. Now as for your skill order, you first want to put a point into your ultimate whenever you can at 6, 11, and 16. You'll then want to focus on maxing your Q ability as quickly as possible because it does do a lot of damage, it's your main way of clearing up minion waves, and it's great at poking the enemy champion. The cooldown also drops 0.5 seconds every time you put a point in the ability, and since you want to use it rather often, it's another reason to max it. Then next you want to max your W ability second because your shield does scale off of your maximum health as you put points in it, and of course so does the damage reduction as well. That of course means you will have to max your E ability last, but you do want to point early on in it at level 3 so you can use it to jump onto the enemy champion and then use your other abilities. Next we're going to look at how to use these abilities together, aka Galio's combos. So first here we have your quick trading combo, and all you have to do is jump onto the enemy with your E, auto attack, then hit with a Q and a really quick W and auto attack again. This will do a lot of damage to the champion really quickly, and of course since there is 2 abilities in between those auto attacks, you will get off 2 empowered auto attacks with your passive. For this next combo here, we're going to do almost the same thing, except we're going to channel the W to hold them in the full duration of the Q. So just like before, E onto your target, auto attack them, channel up a W and let go when you do reach that max duration, hit your Q, and then auto attack again. This yet again is going to do a lot of damage because you will get off those 2 empowered auto attacks, but it will do a little bit more damage because you do have the channel W's damage increase, and you will hold them in the Q pretty much no matter what. For our next combo, we're going to incorporate a channel W with your flash, which is a great way to engage onto a target really quickly. So to pull off the combo, start channeling your W and then after a few seconds flash onto your target and hit them with a Q and an auto attack. This isn't going to do anywhere near as much damage as the other combos, but if you want to quickly finish off a target or just taunt targets really quickly for your team, it's fantastic in those situations. Next here we're going to start the same with a flash taunt, but instead we're going to also incorporate our E and a second empowered auto attack. So start by channeling your W and then flash onto the target, and then auto attack them, land your Q and E, and then auto attack them a second time. This is definitely going to be a slower combo, but you will want to use it when you engage onto those higher health targets to use your full kit's damage and do as much damage as possible. And finally, for the last combo, we're going to go full team fight and add the ultimate and a channel W. So first jump to a target with your ultimate, and once you land, charge a full W, taunt your target, and then auto attack, QE, auto attack. This is going to crowd control the enemy team as long as possible with your ultimate and a channel W, and then you can use the rest of your kit to delete a squishier target. As per usual, we get our 2 empowered auto attacks because we space our abilities. During the lane phase on Galio, you'll want to be last hitting and poking the enemy champion with both your Q ability and your passive. Of course, keep in mind your passive's cooldown is reduced by 4 seconds every time you land an ability, so you will want to use it first if you can and land your Q afterwards to reduce the cooldown. When you are farming, you want to try to hit the arc damage on the melee minions, with the tornado landing on the caster minions behind them, so you will one-shot the casters and also do damage to the melee. Galio's also got a really strong lane to gank as well because you do have multiple crowd controls from your E and your W. That means even if Galio has a jungler like Master Yi, he's still able to gank the lane rather easily because you can hold the target in place for a long duration and Master Yi can do his damage. But other than that though, during the early lane phase, all you want to be doing is farming minions, trying to harass the enemy champion, and keeping your lane warded so you don't die to the enemy jungler. Another really strong part of Galio, of course, is his roaming. You can shove minion waves really quickly with your Q and your passive, and then look to gank either top or bottom lane. When you get there, you want to try to hit a target with your E ability, and after you knock them up, channel the W to taunt them, and then get off your damage from your Q and your passive. Now, although these roams are already pretty strong, they get even better when you do acquire your ultimate. Since your ultimate does have a 4000 range at level 1, you can roam just partway up or down river and jump to an ally that is in need to try to win a team fight, small engagement, or help them if they're getting ganked by the enemy jungler to turn it in your team's favor. Then of course, if your team does decide to go for a dragon or a rift herald, you can just sit in mid lane and shove it, and if they do need help, you can jump to them with your ultimate and turn the team fight. Galio does have some of the best roams and ganks when his ultimate is available, so make sure you're paying attention to the map, and if you do have the opportunity, use it to jump to your team and help them and win a fight. Now, although Galio is a very strong champion at the moment, he still comes with his counters. So first, there are some AD champions that do have range that can poke Galio over and over again that can be pretty hard for him to fight. These are those relatively safe pokey champions like Jace and Gangplank. Against these champions, your W shield isn't going to help you at all, so it's not going to be that effective for trading. They also play at a pretty decent range as well, so landing your E, W, or your Q on them is also not the easiest thing for you. Against these champions early on, you'll have to play pretty safe and try to get your Seeker's arm guard and get that armor stacking just to help with their damage. Now, something else that is pretty annoying for you are those long-range mages like Lux and Vel'Koz. These champions have a lot longer ranges than you, so it's going to be pretty hard to get onto them to trade, and of course they're just going to poke you over and over again. Just play passively early on in the game unless you see an opening. If they do miss their skill shots, you can go for an engage because they are very squishy. Then of course, not a true counter, but magic resist stackers are going to be really hard for you to kill. Just pay attention to the enemy team's itemization, and if you do see a lot of magic resist, consider getting your void staff really early to cut through it so you can do at least some damage. Now let's look at Galio's own itemization, and for your first buys you want to rush a Hextech Proto Belt and Sork Shoes. The Hextech Proto Belt's a really nice item to rush because it's not that costly and it gives you a nice health pool, ability power, and you can also activate it for increased burst damage. Of course, then there's the 10% cooldown reduction as well, which is really nice because your ultimate has a very long cooldown, especially at level 1. You'll then want to go for those Sork Shoes just for early magic penetration to make it through early magic resist, but of course you could go for defensive options as well like Ninja Tabbies or Merc Treads. Unless you really need those defensive stats though, I would recommend going for Sork Shoes. So after you've rushed these 2 items, you want to go for your core, which is the Morellonomicon and Azonia's Hourglass. The Morellonomicon is a really nice item as well because yet again you get that health and ability power, but it also has some increased magic penetration on it as well, and it applies grievous wounds. This is going to be great against any of those champions that do have some ridiculous healing, like say a Dr. Mundo or a Soraka. The Zonia's is then a really nice defensive option because you get some armor, ability power, and yet again 10% cooldown reduction again. The best part of it, however, is the stasis, which make you invulnerable for 2.5 seconds, and this is really nice on Galio because you will be jumping into the middle of team fights with your ultimate or your E, so it's a great way to help you survive through those fights. So once you've acquired these 4 items, of course you've got 2 more slots, and that moves us into the item pool. My favorites are definitely going for the Rabadon's Death Cap and the Void Staff because you will get a massive chunk of ability power and you'll have a lot of magic penetration, but you can always go for defensive options as well. The Banshee's Veil is a great way to add some magic resist and yet still have some ability power and block spells every 40 seconds. Of course, you could go for an Abyssal Mask as well, which also has magic resist, but will still increase your damage by a percentage. Against those very heavy AD teams, you could pick up something like a Randuin's or say something like a Thornmail, but usually you will want to pick up something with ability power because of course Galio is very bursty and he needs as much AP as possible. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, Galio is one of the best team fighters out there, so let's talk about how to team fight on Galio. So a lot of it just comes down to a really well-placed ultimate. If you can, wait until one of your teammates is in the middle of a team fight, then ultimate down on them, and when you arrive, you're going to pop up the entire enemy team, and then you can try to taunt them with a channel W, just like you saw in combo number 5. As long as you can chain crowd control the enemy team with just these abilities, you're already going to have a very successful team fight. So once you do these things, what do you want to do next? Well, if you do see a squishy target that is positioned pretty poorly, you can try to jump onto them with your E and then delete them with a Q and an auto attack. Of course, making that team fight a 5v4 for your team right off the bat is a pretty damn good way to win it as well. Now, although Galio is definitely a better team fight with his ultimate, you don't necessarily need it to team fight. When you don't have your ultimate available, you will want to try to taunt as many targets as possible, obviously with your W. You can do this by channeling your W from out of sight, try to jump into the middle of a team fight and taunt as many targets as possible, and then go from there. Of course, you will want to try to team fight around your ultimate's cooldown as if you were something like an Amumu because it is incredibly strong in team fights, but you don't necessarily need it, especially if your team is way ahead. And with that said, that completes the Galio guide. For any of you that have previously watched my guides, I'm sure you've noticed it's changed a little bit with the timestamps and the combo changes, so if you did notice that, please let me know in the comments down below and let me know what you thought of the changes. Of course, if you guys did enjoy the video, please also like and subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out like this during Season 9. But with that said, thank you guys so much for watching the guide, I really do appreciate it, so take it easy, have a good day, and peace.